We're heading into the last week of the Valorant 2023 Champions Tournament, and I want to go team by team of the four remaining teams and look at the player or players who I think are the leading MVP candidates as we finish off the tournament. So let's start with the teams where I think it's a little bit easier to identify one leading candidate. We'll start with Fnatic, and I think the MVP candidate from there is Alphayear. He was really, really incredible earlier in the tournament. I think he captured the audience's attention, which really helps in terms of earning MVP. You've got to have a little bit of a kind of a swell of support coming from the cast and the community and so on, and just how good he was early on really set that up for him. I think against DRX in the most recent match, he was a little below average, especially for himself and the standards that he set for himself, the expectations. But that'll be forgotten very, very quickly if he's good the rest of the way. His numbers are tournament leading, especially if you look only at teams that made it into the playoffs. He's got the highest rounds above replacement at 3.7, which is really huge over this number of games. His cast plus minus +7, that's also a very high number, especially for a Sentinel. Where it's really important, I'd say, to be showing up and doing something useful every single round. So relative to what you'd expect from the agents he plays. He goes out there and he gets something done, round in, round out. He's contributing, and he has those pop off rounds, and is really carrying this team, I think. So he's a pretty obvious candidate, MVP frontrunner. I think something crazy would have to happen if Fnatic win the tournament and someone other than him to be MVP. PRX, I think it's also a little bit easier, not quite as easy, but a little bit easier than some of the other teams to pick out a single candidate. Some people, when I kind of cast around the community and say, hey, what are you thinking? Who do you think are the leaders? Mindfreak's name comes up. Something comes up, which I think is a little bit of a kind of a narrative continuation from pre-tournament, where I really was pointing to him, and a lot of people were pointing to something, saying, hey, this is really exciting. What a fun player to watch, all these things. But I don't think he's quite delivered on the hype or the expectations that were maybe unfairly set up for him. But the player that I'd really stand out above them on PRX is Forsaken. He's not just been solid, he's been exceptionally solid. He's delivered really great performances almost every map. I'd say he's only had 2 bad showings all tournament so far, on Split against Loud and on Pearl against Crew. Those are a little bit weaker, but every other map he's either been like well above average or incredibly far above average. He brings out these games where he's just controlling everything. Statistically, he's got a 3.0 rounds above replacement, so not quite as lofty as Alphayear, but very, very good. He has a positive cast plus minus. He's doing all the things that you'd want or expect from him, and far beyond that. So, given the way PRX plays being so kind of loose and fluid sometimes, and a little bit hard to pin down, and he comes in, playing all these different roles and really anchoring things, I think, for them. So Forsaken would be my choice from PRX. So let's talk now about the other 2 teams where I think it's a little bit more difficult to pinpoint just a single player as their frontrunner. For Loud, I think there are 2 players that you can choose between. One would be Les, who, I've got a lot of, just put it out there, I've got a lot of personal bias in favor of Les. I've been a huge fan of his all year, and going back to last year as well. I think just the way he contributes in his fragging, his util, all the different things that he does that he sometimes flies under the radar a little bit, behind Aspas and behind some of these things that maybe are a little more eye-catching. But I think I've really been looking at him, especially knowing that he is one of the impending free agents from Loud, and I think probably the best impending free agent in all of Americas. And he's really been showing up this tournament. He has posted 2.7 rounds above replacement. A little bit, I think less, or Loud has had a little bit of a more kind of circuitous route through the tournament so far, and the players' numbers reflect that. But 2.7 is, if you go an entire season with that, then you're one of the best players in the league. The more rounds you play, the more those numbers kind of get condensed from some of those very lofty kind of high 3s or 4s. And he's had really, really high highs. Probably his highest was playing Split against PRX when he put up 24 kills, 7 deaths. And that's one that really get people looking at him. But He's been, not quite that good, but he's been very, very good in most maps in general. The thing is, he's had a teammate who's been even more consistent and maybe not had quite the same level of, a peak performance. But Cowan Zine from the Initiator role has been just so rock solid almost every single map. Playing a lot of Sky, a lot of Fade, a few games of Sova. He hasn't had the same number of low performances as Les, which neither of them has had a lot of poor games. But Cowan Zine's, I'd say his lows have been higher, his highs have been lower, but just been so steady, just constantly contributing. To be doing this in his rookie year at the biggest tournament of the year is so huge for a player like Cowan Zine, who came in, had to fill big shoes, and he's been so good. His numbers actually individually are better than Les's. He's got a 3.0 RAR and plus 2.9 cast plus minus. Again, in a UTO role, that stat is I think especially important. So if Loud can finish off this lower bracket run, and Cowan Zine continues to play at this level, I think he'll be a pretty easy MVP choice. EG, it's also a little bit difficult. More difficult than most people might realize to pick an MVP candidate from the two of them. Obviously, I think that the first name that's going to come into most people's minds is Demon One. He's such an exciting player to not just in game but out of game to kind of be attached to and be excited about the story there. So there's very good reason that he's getting a lot of attention. Setting aside his gameplay for a moment, he's a rookie. He plays Jet. That's very exciting. He's got a lot of support from his org, and he goes out in camera and he says these outrageous things that the Zoomers love. So eyes are on him, and he has really been delivering on that, especially more recently in the tournament. Frankly, after the first couple maps of the tournament, he wasn't playing that well. He had some poor showings, but the last 3 maps he's played, he's averaged above an 8 point, I don't know what the exact average is. I didn't check it, but he's getting, higher than an 8 rounds above replacement across those 3 maps. He's just peaking so high at such an important time. It would be almost impossible to see him sustain that over the rest of the event. But even if he does, 2/3 of the way up to that level of performance, that is just an incredible level of play, and will very justifiably make him an MVP choice. Along with all the other kind of storyline things that feed into that. But there's another player on EG who I think is getting nowhere near the attention he deserves for how well he's playing. And on the whole, tournament long, I think has actually been better, which is Ethan. He's been, as you'll see in a lot of these comparisons, there's one player who's kind of been the less consistent, but had these really high highs. But so Ethan has been the more consistent player of the two. Kind of like a Forsaken, but his lows have been less low than Forsaken even. He's, been stronger statistically than anyone in the tournament who made playoffs except for Alfier. He's got a 3.4 rounds above replacement for a player who's getting very, very little public discussion that I've seen. His cast plus minus, again, playing mostly initiators, so this is hugely important, plus 8.8. So he's delivering, almost a 9 percentage point higher cast than you'd expect, given the agents and maps he's on. You don't get a player playing the way Demon One has been playing if you don't have the initiator and controller util around them to allow them to go off like that. So, I really think Ethan would be my personal choice, depending what happens the rest of the tournament. He doesn't have kind of the sexiness of the rookie Jet player, but he's just been so incredibly great. He deserves to be right up there, getting discussed with all these superstar players. And I can't wait to see kind of what the pair of them do the rest of the way. So those are my choices for MVP candidates. Love to know what your thoughts are, how you feel that your interpretation of the numbers or your eye test of the games you've been watching kind of matches up to these things. So feel free to leave some comments, have some discussion, and get excited with me for the final week of the event.